Hello and welcome to What the Hey, where I'm your regular host of What the Hey, but today on What the Hey, I'm once again doing yet another book review with a boy. So before I talk about the plot and the characters of today's book, I'm going to give some details about today's book, and today's book is The Titan's Curse, and it's within the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series. The Titan's Curse, which is the third book in the Percy Jackson series, was written by Riordan, so he's like the person to thank for actually creating the story. This specific book was published on May 1st of 2007, and the publishers are both Miramax and Hyperion Books, so if you want to look at some more books by those publishers, those are the names of the publishers, and when this book got published. The Titan's Curse has 20 different chapters to read through, 312 pages, and the genre for the book is usually like adventure, Greek mythology, kind of that stuff, which is fun. So now that I have the minor details about the book out of the way, I'm going to talk about the major characters in this specific book. A majority of them are from the past two books, so you may not be very familiar with them. There's a few new characters, but I'm just going to go through the major characters in this book. So the main character of the entire series would be Percy Jackson, who is the half-blood or the son of the Greek god Poseidon. In the whole book series, he goes through a lot of problems, goes on quests. He's just basically the main character. Next, you have Talia Grace, who is the daughter of the Greek god Zeus. So a majority of the characters in this book, if you're not familiar, are like the sons or daughters of Greek gods, and Talia is one of them. The other character who is a half-blood that's talked about a lot in the book, even though we're actually not with them for a lot of the book, would be Annabeth Chase, who is the daughter or half-blood of the Greek god Athena. Another character that's mentioned a lot in the story would be Grover Underwood, who's a satyr, which is a mythological creature, and I would personally argue that he is probably one of the closer friends of Percy Jackson. So another major character would be Bianca Angelo, who is the sister of Nico Angelo, who I'll talk about. Bianca is a half-blood, and the characters in the book don't figure out who her parents are, like her Greek, godparents are, until the end of the book. The next character, who I kind of already mentioned, would be Nico Angelo, who is the brother of Bianca Angelo. He is a half-blood, and he has an interest in Greek mythology, but we also don't know who his parents are, like his Greek godparents. Another character that's talked about and we kind of see in the book would be Artemis, who is the Greek goddess of the hunt, kind of animals and stuff. And she kind of goes off on an adventure, which I'll kind of talk about, but she's in there too. The next character would be Zoe Nightshade, who is a follower of Artemis. She's basically known as a hunter who goes on missions and adventures with Artemis, but she's basically a warrior, basically. The next character in the story, who is basically the antagonist, would be Luke. He is basically the son of Hermes, and he causes a lot of trouble for Percy, Annabeth, everyone, but he's pretty much the antagonist. So now that I've talked about the major characters, I kind of wanted to go into a very, very basic summary of the plot from my understanding of it. A lot of what I'm gonna say is gonna seem confusing if you haven't read the book, so I would definitely already, before I give my general opinions, I would suggest going and reading the book, because it's good. So the initial and first major plot point is Percy, Annabeth, and Talia go to this school out in the woods randomly and meet up with Grover because Grover has apparently found two half-bloods in the school. So after a little bit, Percy finds the two half-bloods, and he gets in a fight with a manticore who's trying to kidnap the half-bloods. They kind of defeat the manticore, although Annabeth kind of gets stolen away by the manticore, which is kind of confusing, but it makes sense when you read it. So after the fight is over, Percy takes the two new half-bloods over to Camp Half-Blood, which is basically where half-blood kids go and train to become heroes. So he takes Nico and Bianca back to camp along with some hunters from the Greek goddess Artemis, so they're there as well. Artemis essentially had to leave all of them and go on this journey to go and find this spooky monster who's causing havoc basically, so she doesn't go with them, but they go back to Camp Half-Blood. I know it's confusing already. Once Percy and his friends, except for Annabeth, get back to Camp Half-Blood, Zoe Nightshade, who is a follower of Artemis, and Percy himself begin to have nightmares that Annabeth and Artemis are in trouble. And then there's this character called the Oracle who essentially gives quests to heroes and half-bloods. So the Oracle tells Zoe to like go on this adventure and to basically go and save Artemis because Artemis actually is in trouble. Zoe does not grant Percy Jackson permission to go on the quest because with the hunters, they're all girls and like apparently guys can't go like on trips with them and stuff. Like that's like the code, you know. So once the main group of people on the quest go out to hopefully save Artemis, Percy essentially sneaks out of the Camp Half-Blood, because he's like, they're not gonna go save Annabeth, they're going to save Artemis. So he's like, I gotta go on the journey as well, but separately kind of. Eventually Percy meets up with the group because he's encountered some dangers in the same area that they're in, and he basically is allowed to go on the quest after all because they're like, this situation's dangerous, let's all go together, yahoo. Eventually, all the people group up and Percy and his friends save Artemis and Annabeth, and they kind of, like, solve their current problems, although problems are still, like, happening. Once the main fight is over, Percy and his friends basically go up to where the Greek gods are, and they solve problems with, like, deciding on whether or not to fight some titans, because that's a whole problem. And then finally, the last major plot point is Percy goes back to Camp Half-Blood, and there's a problem with Nico because of problems with Bianca, which I'm not going to say because that's kind of like a big plot point. But there's a problem with Nico, and he gets like all mad and upset with Percy, so he like escapes Camp Half-Blood, and that essentially presents the problem for the next book. So that's essentially how I interpreted the plot of this book. So now I'm going to go into my general thoughts. So as always, I like the Percy Jackson series from what I've read. There's like 2 more I need to go through as far as I'm concerned. I like the setting because a lot of it takes place in the United States, so sometimes when a certain place is mentioned, I'm like, oh, I know where that is, kind of. Characters are always fun. The only character that I still don't really like is Talia, like the daughter of Zeus. Like, she's cool, but she just kind of like, she seems kind of annoying. Like, throughout the entire book. There are reasons that kind of explain why she is the way she is, but she's not a character that I really like. In terms of whether I like this book over the other books, this book is okay. I don't dislike the book, it's just not my favorite. I think my favorite part of the book was like the last final scene because it gave me like a sense of urgency while reading it. I was like, is everyone gonna be okay? And everyone technically wasn't, which I'm not gonna explain that. But that was probably my favorite part. Essentially, it was a good book. I did enjoy reading it. Another thing that I do like about the Percy Jackson books is that, like, the reading level isn't a specific age. Like, pretty much anyone can read these and enjoy them. I mean, the only thing is, like, if you don't like Greek mythology, this may not be the kind of book for you. Essentially, I like this book. I'm excited to get to the next one, and I'll probably review the last 2 as well. I think there's just 5 in this series, so that's fun. So that's essentially my review of The Titan's Curse, so if you have any questions about the series or this book in general, let me know and I'll try and answer them to my best ability, so thank you very much for watching. Bye!